Well, Spock, do you want to do Diablo 2? I should watch the next episode of South Park post pandemic. Okay, lay down. I only plays it very casually, especially compared to you. Whoa, Jesus, dude, calm down. Quit throwing shade. I'll ring you up.
How? Okay, how about now? Is it any better?
Let me go ahead and start talking. Oh, yeah, that's way better. I can hear myself, but it's way, way distant, so.
Okay, yeah, I'm. I'm. It's the most rickety headset ever. So.
Yeah, there's probably some feedback or something. Anyway, yeah, Diablo 2, the ultimate ARPG, which means it's a miserable grind for no reward. What's your experience with Diablo 2?
So I never beat it back in the day. I actually play. I used to play Diablo 1 a shitload. Like when I was a kid, I played it way more than 2.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can
And
kind of see that because Diablo 1 is a much more like single player focused thing.
yeah, and I did play it online. I remember you didn't need a CD key. You could literally just play any pirated copy. It was crazy. Or you could just generate this key. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah. When you say you never beat it, do you mean you never beat normal or you never beat hell?
Oh yeah, 2 never beat normal. In my current playthrough, I'm still on the last act, like the Lords of Destruction act.
Oh, okay. So you still haven't beaten normal in this.
Right, yeah. Like I said, it's very casual, my experience with it.
Yeah, I mean that's to an extreme, I'd say, because normal's not that hard to beat, honestly.
No, I'm playing Barbarian. I've pretty much just walked through it, you know. I read the thread, so I see how the higher difficulties are played more strategically or slowly.
Well, and also just like the way character build goes, it just it gets a lot narrower what you're able to get away with. I think that's the main thing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily like I'm not compelled to really play the higher difficulties from what I've seen because it's you know it becomes a matter of like grinding for very specific gear upgrades or very specific like stat modifiers.
Yeah.
It's not interesting to me in the slightest.
Although, in my opinion, like from where I'm coming at it, the farming for specific statistical difference things, like the specific modifiers, I think that is one of the most interesting things about this game in particular when compared to any other ARPG. Because I know I mentioned it in the thread, or in my thread anyway, when I talked about Diablo 2, but in any other ARPG, you really do just put your mouse cursor over anything new, and if there's a green arrow pointing up, then you go, this is better.
Yeah.
And that's not really true at all in Diablo 2. In fact, if they had that, it would lead you so far astray that it would just be worse.
Right, and that's why it's probably more interesting to talk about the legacy of Diablo 2 and how we still like every first-person shooter, every action game, every RPG has the same like legendary, elite, rarity,
Yeah.
sort of tiering. But you're right, now gear is at a point where It's this very gradual, like piecemeal progression that's predictable, and gear is not interesting anymore. Whenever anyone complains about MMOs or
Looter
multiplayer
shooters.
RPGs, they say, "Oh yeah, gear's boring now. Why is it so boring? I don't get it."
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's just like any other mechanic or any other genre, like it gets the people that emulate it and don't understand what they're emulating at all, and then that becomes the norm.
Yeah, or just this gradual degeneration from what initially inspired it all to this new, and really it's probably more World of Warcraft, which is still the same
Yeah.
thing. It's Blizzard copying themselves, and making it worse.
So have you played Resurrected at all, or is that what you're playing now?
Yeah, that's what I'm playing now, and I set it down when Forza Horizon 5 came out. I was playing it really, really casually, just a little bit here and there on my Barbarian, so I'm on the last act.
Are you playing with the controller? Because I think that's one of the biggest changes.
Yeah, playing with the controller actually is really cool for like the normal difficulty where you're literally just pushing forward.
Yeah, that's how I'm playing my Barbarian when I do play. Um, and it really is, it's shocking how well translated that is, because it's not at all a controller driven game in its original incarnation, and the fact that they managed to kind of hack that in without really changing anything is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely one of the things, though. There was a lot of thought put into like the graphics, and the art style. A lot of thought was put into it to like make it still be Diablo without changing that core,
Yeah.
what people loved about it.
Although that's all gonna change because they're talking about the next patch being balance changes to everything. Although they're apparently they only really mentioned buffs, so trying to like bring shitty skills up to being useful, maybe. But I mean, who knows where that'll end?
Well, yeah, I guess there's still those just never used talents that every class has, or there's, and this is me coming from someone who doesn't have very much experience.
Right.
There seems to be like 2 or 3 generally accepted builds for every class, and if you really start goofing around with other things, you're a psycho and have too much time on your hands.
Oh, or you're just rich and you have like all of these specific items that make something viable that otherwise is completely garbage.
Right. And that sounds interesting on, I guess, like once you reach endgame, you have all these new options to like goof around with and like sandbox. I get that. That's probably fun.
Well, I kind of want to push back on that, because in a way that is some of the point of the game, because there's no real post game or in game like goal for you to achieve. Like once you've beaten hell with a character, that's pretty much it. And the only other like thing to do is to either try and make that character stronger or get the items to make something that wouldn't be viable.
Right.
And I think that's something that is missing from a lot of ARPGs now, and part of why they're so boring is because every class is designed to be, equally self-sufficient, equally viable, equally, fun to play. And so it just kind of levels off what makes Diablo 2 interesting, which is, if you start a game as like a druid that transforms into a werewolf, it gets pretty tough early on. and you really have to work to get that character to a place where it's viable, or you need to go and get him stuff to make his path smoother. Where in any other ARPG, it would either just not ever be something that you could do, like you would just skip out on something like that, or it would be basically the same as playing any other character.
Okay.
Fuck you.
No, that wasn't a sarcastic okay. That was I'm a noob who doesn't know anything about Diablo 2.
But have you played any other ARPGs like Titan Quest or?
Yeah, I've played Titan Quest like forever ago. Do you remember? Was it Nox, the one that was sort of like it had a multiplayer mode that was like an arena shooter, sort of.
Yeah.
Kind of a weird. Yeah, I played a few back in the day when there started to be like that flux of like everyone's got to make their own Diablo now.
Sacred Gold.
Oh yeah, Sacred 2, which was a little different, I guess.
Yeah. But I do feel like in all of those they made a concerted effort to try and like level out the game in a way that Diablo 2 doesn't. And I think that's part of the magic of what keeps people interested and invested in Diablo 2, is that it's not
the rough
even
edges.
Yeah, and also that there are gradients to how challenging certain characters or builds are, not just to perform, but to gear them out, and the amount of thought that has to go into like very specific equipment goals. And you really don't get that with anything else. Like even Path of Exile, you don't really get that.
Okay, so Path of Exile is one that I have not played, and I realize that it's one of the most popular ones probably ever now.
Yeah.
How does Path of Exile differ from like the Diablo 2 and 3 games?
I would say the main thing that separates Path of Exile from those games is that it's much more invested in the kind of seasons of the game, where they'll crank out a new series of content, and that gets like layered onto everything else, and it's like a new set of in-game goal things, and they're always it always felt a little frustrating to me because it was like a treadmill that you had to stay on top of if you ever wanted to see the new stuff, if that makes sense.
Right. So it's sort of like constant new expansions that invalidate the previous content.
Yeah, and I get if this is like your ideal type of game, that having that never-ending treadmill would be kind of compelling in a way, but it would be in a really sick way. And yeah. I'm a little nervous for their plans for Diablo 2 Remastered to basically kind of emulate that and have like new rune words every 6 months or whatever they're talking about.
If they plan on doing like a seasonal thing,
yeah,
where they switch up the rule sets or make balance changes and stuff, and just make that like a separate part of the game, make it a seasonal thing that you create a new character and save and whatever. Yeah. That would kind of make way more sense to me than trying to like rebalance a 20-year-old game for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. I thought they should take it a step further and actually make it so that you make a character into a certain patch the way you can make a legacy character or an expansion character right now.
Right, okay.
But that would be too much work and too much fracturing of the player base, and they're never going to do that. So
yeah,
I guess we're just in for the ride. and I don't think it'll affect you much, honestly. You're not going to break into the like extreme, uh, like the two frame attack builds that were
Right.
temporarily possible in Resurrected before they patched it. Extremely silly to watch. But I think that really encapsulated what the heart of Diablo 2 was all about, which is seeing what is possible within the constraints of what was supposed to be kind of a proto MMO, where the developers and publishers had a lot more control over how powerful you could get, and they just kind of they didn't have the ability to actually exert control over that at the time because patches took so long to develop and push out. And so I think it engendered this style of play that was briefly recaptured with the Resurrected release, but I think is going to be short-lived.
Yeah, just like watching how Blizzard has handled patching games over the years, like playing World of Warcraft back in the day and them trying to like suss out all the various arguments on their forums, like, all right, well, we know that such and such is broken, but here's 50 ideas of how to change it. Let's just pick one and like hope that it didn't work. Well, maybe in a couple patches we'll try a different idea and hope that that one works.
Yeah.
And then that just goes on for like decades.
And nobody is happy, but everyone keeps paying.
Yeah, you just roll it like, will my class or my build be like the meme build of the month? You know, that's like what the game becomes eventually.
Or will it be literally unplayable and people in my guild will throw me out if I log into that character?
Right. Yeah.
Like,
and
no,
so
we're not carrying.
In a way, you could be sort of thankful for that too. That, you know, if Blizzard had tried to continually patch Diablo 2 for the past couple decades, what a utter mess it would be now. You know, like, so that definitely puts Resurrected in that special place with other remasters that people love. Like, I can't wait to try the Tony Hawk 1+2.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome because I used to love those games. But you know, where someone actually put care and effort into all the things that make a remaster like worth it without damaging, you know, that thing that people loved, you know.
Did you play the Demon Souls remaster?
No, I don't have a PS5.
You poor motherfucker.
I know. The original Demon Souls was the reason I bought a PS3 like forever ago.
I mean, I could almost say the same, except I got my PS3 given to me specifically so I could play Demon Souls.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could go on at length about that, but I haven't finished the remaster of Demon Souls, so I'm probably not going to do it this year. I mean, I've got time, but I've also got other things that I want to get done first.
I was kind of cynical about it because, you know, some third-party studio did it, and I think it was the ones who did like all the shitty remasters of Shadow of the Colossus or something.
They did the most recent shitty remaster of it.
Yeah, and so I think I was like, you know, I've played the original Demon Souls a gajillion times. I have no reason to play a remaster at this point. Like, I'll just skip it. You know, I won't care.
Excuse me. I just had a bit of tea go down the wrong way.
Rip.
Oh. Sorry. You were saying...
Take your time.
You were saying something about, you would play... or play something later?
Yeah, or I just like I can sit this one out because the Demon Souls remaster it never appealed to me from the get go, you know.
Like, you don't need it.
Yeah, I played the original so many times that like I'm just there's no reason for me unless unless there was some compelling like new thing. Like I honestly don't even know what's different about it or what they changed.
Well, from what I've played of it, nothing substantial enough to be like, oh, this is worth playing this version instead of the other version, unless you were just in it for graphics. Because it is a lot more detailed in a way that isn't just like for the sake of detail. Like, it does look really good, and all of the effects are nice. And they only sometimes get in the way. But they did add a few things that are just sort of odd and don't really add or detract that much from the game. Like, they added a couple new armor sets. But I don't think they added any other weapons, any new weapons or spells.
Adding more armor isn't a bad idea because they're really like there's really only a couple sets to even wear in the game, you know, once you know
Yeah.
what you're doing.
I mean, it was a lot more restrictive than any of the later games too, because it had gender restrictions on armor, which I believe are still in place in the remaster.
I would have asked that if you hadn't mentioned it because I was curious. It was one of the things everyone thought was incredibly stupid.
It's interesting. I don't really know why they did it, but because
it felt like a holdover of classic RPGs, like computer RPGs.
I guess, but I can't even think of any computer RPGs that had specifically gender bias in equipment use. It was always either class or like race or something like that. Like
did Morrowind? Did Morrowind have gendered stuff?
No, just beast race.
Oh, okay.
Beast races can't use closed helms or boots, and that's it. Nothing.
That's what I'm thinking of.
The only thing gendered in Morrowind is some quest line stuff, but never equipment. Like no D&D settings have. Well, I'm not gonna say no D&D. I'm sure some pen and paper stuff has some sort of gender restrictiveness. At least some of the older ones. But yeah, I can't think of any video game that had gendered equipment aside from Demon Souls.
Yeah, I guess I actually I'm with you. I think it's just like an interesting thing. I don't think it's like an annoying or a bad decision necessarily.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. It's like, oh, you committed to a decision and now you're gonna see consequences in your gameplay.
Yeah, like, you know, I don't know. It is odd because not all of the sets are gendered at all. In fact, there's only a couple that are gendered.
Right.
But yeah, it's one of those quirks that makes Demon Souls, I think, a lot more interesting than like Dark Souls. Although Dark Souls is pretty inarguably a better game all around, I think it does lose some of the bizarre, arbitrary, and kind of half thought out magic that Demon Souls had.
Yeah, it's difficult to, you know, and we're both in the same boat because it's like we wanted to play it as soon as we saw it, and we had to get that PS3 to do it, and it's such a unique like watershed experience where, you know, anything could have happened, and it's so mysterious, and the way the world's presented is like unique, and you know, obviously Dark Souls was like you had that previous experience with Demon Souls, and so you anticipate another game. And
Right.
when it turns out as good as it did, and all the edges are kind of sanded off, there's so many things that are better, and Estus Flasks are like this, just like everyone's copied it. Estus Flasks has become the standard in action games. You know?
It wasn't even new to From games at that time.
Yeah, I guess you had mentioned earlier that some of the Kingsfield games.
Yeah,
And,
they toyed with the idea of the refillable healing flasks, and even having Estus, or Ashen Estus from Dark Souls 3.
yeah.
There were you could find fountains in Kingsfield 2 JP and which is Kingsfield 1, the English release, that heal you, and ones that provide mana, and ones that do both, that you can refill your crystal flasks at. But yeah, I see what you mean about them kind of refining it.
Yeah, so it's hard to kind of like judge even my own experiences, like which one has more of a like compelling aura surrounding it. And I'm agreeing with you that Demon Souls does have that sort of air of mystery that hasn't been replicated fully. You know,
Yeah.
the other games all have it, but it's to a lesser extent because they've been.
They're less mechanically obtuse.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I do think that Dark Souls does a much better job of having that vagueness in its story and world building. But the fact that it loses a lot of it mechanically is kind of disappointing. Although there are still glimpses of it, like with the Miracle Resonance things.
Oh, like when you put down signs, it like buffs miracles nearby or whatever for online players.
It's supposed to, but it's completely broken in all releases, I think.
Yeah, all the various covenant things are kind of weird.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's like the vagrants from where you lay items down in your world and they kind of shift over to other people's worlds.
Yeah, I only saw like 2 of those in like the 8 playthroughs of DS1 I did, and it was always like a mind-blowing thing, like what the fuck.
Yeah, I only ever saw one. The entire time I played through all versions of it on PS3 and PC.
Yeah, so even Dark Souls 1 had a lot of untested and unfinished content and features and stuff that, you know, they're just like, well, whatever, we'll leave it in.
Yeah, and bringing that back to Diablo 2, I think it has a lot of similar things. Like a lot of the equipment is not useful from a metagaming standpoint, or is kind of, you know, people just trash a lot of it, like sell it to the vendor immediately or not even pick it up. But they throw around a lot of interesting ideas. Like there's a lot of one-off rune words that do interesting things that aren't really relevant in the game as people play it at a high level. I think that's sort of like the games, you know, the ideas we're talking about with Dark Souls and Demon Souls and stuff like Diablo, or not Diablo, Daggerfall, where it doesn't really change the way you play, but it leaves open the possibility that you could try and interact with a partially thought through part of the game.
I think I see what you're saying. Where like even in its systems, you know, that seem like gamey or whatever, there's actually like, you know, some kind of like intuition leading you to like try different things or build things a certain way.
Yeah. Like, do you know what a rift sin is?
No.
So it's a kick assassin, an assassin based around just spamming the kick skills. That specifically is geared with a couple combination of rune words, so that they stack the chance to cast certain skills that are on certain pieces of equipment. So it's like, 2% chance to cast Frozen Orb at this level.
Okay.
And they combine all of those with incredibly highly stacked increased attack rate. So they go in and start kicking at like, a kick every 2 frames or something like that. And so they actually proc all of those like random weird, spell casts. And so they're throwing out like firestorms and frozen orbs, like all different elements. And it's like kind of effective and really hilarious to watch.
Yeah.
And
It's like you're constantly rolling the dice on what's gonna proc now.
yeah, and you don't have to worry about immunities because you're throwing every element randomly all the time. And that's something
That's
that
interesting.
yeah, that's something that I don't think would be possible with a more well thought out character build, or more character balance or anything like that. I think that comes out of people kind of experimenting with half thought out systems.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Alright, so where should Diablo 2 go? You haven't played it a whole lot, but I doubt you've played most of this list.
Yeah, not really. The I've played some of the older Yakuza games and Mega Man. I played all the Mega Mans when I was a kid, and the Lego Star Wars games. I would definitely not put it above like the Mega Man 2 or 4, but it's got to be up there, partially for like just its effect on video games as a whole. Like, you could probably talk for hours with anybody about like just the DNA of this game being in every game, in some way or another,
Right.
moving forward. So you have to put it up pretty high on the list, but I wouldn't put it above Mega Man 2.
Yeah. And Mega Man 4, I think, is a little bit more fun to play through just on the spur of a moment. And I'm one of those people who, I'll watch a speedrun or something of Diablo 2 and go, oh yeah, I want to play through normal as an Amazon, like a Bozon or something, and I'll actually go do something like that.
Right.
But it's still a lot more of a commitment, especially if you actually want to get through hell with any character class, even if it's the easy ones. You're carrying a lot, and that's not always the easiest thing to commit to. Versus like a Mega Man game, like a good Mega Man game. I am technically in this stream, which makes it a good stream. That's absolutely correct, Sap. I was gonna immediately compare it to Dragon Quest, which is similar in the sense that it is an awful, miserable grind if you let it become that. But Dragon Quest definitely forces you to grind, where I think even going into hell, you don't really, depending on your character type, I don't think you really need to grind in Diablo 2 unless you want something specific to happen.
Right. I feel like the grind in Diablo 2 probably comes way later, where like maybe you're trying, you're having trouble with certain resistances on enemies, and it's like, okay, I need to like create a build of gear for when I come across this one obnoxious enemy type that gives me too much trouble to deal with.
Oh
You know?
no, oh no, sweetheart, you clearly have not experienced hell. In
No
hell,
way.
that one obnoxious enemy type is 1/3 of the enemy types. every
Right.
every single thing is immune to something, and 1/3 of them are immune to whatever element you do, unless you're physical or magic damage.
So what are you supposed to do otherwise? Just like kite them until you die of old age, or just grind for the gear? That's just it.
You fucking sit on it, buddy. You fucking walk past, and if you can't walk past, I mean, there are workarounds. You can shop a wand of lower resist, which lets you break some immunities, so you lower their resistance below 100% resistance, which makes
Uh-huh.
them literally immune and even, absorb. But you can't do that to all enemy types, and it's extremely obfuscated from the player whether or not you can do that. I mean, I guess not extremely, because if you do it and you can do damage, then obviously you've broken their immunity, and I think it also removes the tooltip that says they're immune, at least in Resurrected it does. And there's other things. Paladins obviously can get an aura. You can make a rune word that you can have your mercenary have that aura that lowers enemy resistances. You can stack a bunch of shit that lowers resistances, but all of that is again stuff that you're only going to be able to do once you've already gotten to the point where you can get through hell anyway. And so the real answer is you just leave.
Yeah.
And there's like a couple classes and builds that absolutely have to deal with immunities in order to progress through hell solo. And those all have workarounds that you just look up, honestly, when you get to that point.
Yeah, all the various metagaming turns me off of it, because there's the whole trade economy,
Right.
and that seems like kind of like, well, it's a great, it's not even gaming, it's just like you're playing some kind of gotcha thing at that point, and you're trading,
Well,
cards with your other pervert buddies.
the problem is it becomes social gaming or game theory gaming at that point, where
Right.
this is going to shock both of you, but I am not social at all. And so I literally cannot bring myself. Who is the other voice? Spock's brain? Yes. Yeah, it's Spock's brain.
Yeah. Maybe sexual ass pussy has more nuanced opinions on the end game than I do, and has played this game more. I don't know.
Sexual ass pussy, do you have anything to say about the end game for Diablo 2? I do not. You're on the hook still. So, what was I talking about before?
Sorry.
I don't remember. Was I talking about immunities still?
No, we were past that.
Oh, I think we were talking about just the grinding in general and comparing it to Dragon Quest.
Oh yeah.
Um,
So a lot of RPGs are, fall into that, and I get what you're saying with like Diablo 2 tries to be, at least for a while, like to transcend that, where there's enough content linearly playing through the game that you get the enough gear and levels and whatever, and the
Yeah.
skills you need to beat it.
yeah, but I don't know if it really succeeds, because again, a lot of builds do peter out or just never start treading water in the first place. And you have to keep in mind the extremely limited respecs that are in the game now were patched in at a later point.
That's crazy.
There literally, at release, there were no respecs, there were no synergies, so everything was just statistically like a good 25% weaker, at least, because they didn't have any bonuses from synergies. And then a lot of the in-game equipment was added later. So in-game in vanilla, like I don't know how anybody got into the 90s, like level 90, just fighting Diablo, Hell Diablo.
Because you get so much more XP from the next act.
Yeah, and even then, like, it's a miserable grind to get up into the 90s. Even with a full party, like, it takes a long time. And they then started patching the way you gain XP and making it more difficult for you to, you know, kind of slingshot people up in the levels.
Right.
So maybe
yeah, I'm with
maybe
you.
active.
All that social gaming stuff is just not appealing.
Oh yeah, that's what I was saying. That I can't get into the trading. Like I physically can't bring myself to like go from game to game and like beg people to trade me this item for this item. So I mostly miss out on that whole aspect of the game, which does make it a lot more difficult to do certain things. Like I've never made a real gimmick build. It's a little alleviated now with playing with people from Bad Game because I can like throw up a post on the forums and be like, I need to get rid of this item. Does anybody have an arachnid's mesh or whatever? And it's less like trading and like trying to get a good deal and more just like, if we don't do this, we're just going to sell it to the vendor anyway. Or put it on another character we're not actually playing.
Right.
What about Deathloop? Do you have any opinions about Deathloop?
So I asked about Deathloop, I think yesterday, because it's one of those things that I have an extreme aversion to. So I haven't played it, obviously.
Yeah.
I see people talk about it, and it's like roguelike FPS or whatever. You see like buzzwords buzzing around. It's like, fuck this. I'm not even gonna give my attention to it.
Right.
So, but so many people now at this point are giving it like Game of the Year awards and recommendations and talking about how amazing it was that I obviously can't ignore it now, and I'll probably try it at some point out of curiosity.
I'll set your mind at ease about the Game of the Year thing. I don't think there's much to that, honestly. I think it's just that there's not much going on in the realm of AAA games this year.
Okay.
And it checks a lot of boxes for people who are doing awards or, like, you know, nominating things for awards and deciding that kind of thing. And that's not to say that it's not deserving or not a good game, but it's also not a roguelike. So, like, at all.
Okay.
I mean, it kind of is, but it's more like looter shooter kind of thing, and even then it's very subdued. Like, you do get random weapon drops with like random mods, but there's not much difference between like a bad shotgun and an epic legendary whatever shotgun. It's still mostly a shotgun. When you point it at a guy and pull the trigger, it normally blows him in half.
Okay.
It's more like all of the randomization stuff is more just to prevent it from falling into the same trap that the Prey DLC had, where you would just get the ultimate of everything and know where everything was and go get that and just sort of stockpile it. But yeah.
So would you say it's something closer to like a Hotline Miami?
Not really. It's not fast paced enough, even if you are playing it like, very edge of your seat, winging it. Um, did you play any of the other Arcane games?
Okay.
Prey,
All
Dishonored.
right, so I played the Prey remake. I have not played Dishonored 1 and 2. I should play those.
Prey is not a remake, by the way. They just took the name and the IP and applied it to a completely different game.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I
Yeah.
never played the original Prey, but
The
I had assumed they were related.
Nope. A lot of people made that assumption and were like, "What the fuck is this?" The original Prey is actually kind of cool, but it's also kind of a bland. What do you call it? Uh, like 2000s era, like Doom
Yeah.
3 FPS. But it has a lot of charm. It just in the stuff surrounding it. It's a bland, typical, ugly mid aughts console shooter, but it had portals, is what Sap says, and that's kind of it. But it also had Art Bell playing himself.
That's really fucking cool.
And the aliens are all listening in with rapt attention to the Art Bell show, coast to
Wow.
coast, and he's the only person who's like at all clued in. And the best part of it is Art Bell, in game, doesn't think it's real. He's like rolling his eyes at all the reports about the alien invasion. Which is perfect if you've ever actually listened to Coast to Coast and Art Bell.
Oh yeah.
Where he knows that something's just bullshit. And
Right.
he's just keeping them talking.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's definitely, you're right. There's two where he's like he definitely is way into a lot of stuff, like, when he has Al Bielek on talking about Philadelphia Experiment, he's just like, that's the stuff he loves, and he'll talk like real in depth about.
Right.
But then there's like the lady who drew a map of like the new United States from like a vision she had.
Right.
And it's some total crackpot trying to sell people like a cloth map that they painted or something.
And he's just like keeping the show rolling and just like
Yeah.
putting just enough English on the ball to make sure that it keeps going so that we can see where it ends up without like tainting it with his own thoughts or opinion on it. That's what he was the master of.
Right.
And I think that's conveyed really well in the original Prey, where you'll listen to a clip and like one of the aliens will literally at some point calls down and is like, "I am the key master," and he's just like, really, what is the key and how are you the master of the key, or something like that. It's great.
Yeah, I've never heard this before. I basically knew what Sap said. It was just another throwaway single player FPS or whatever
And
from that era.
and it is absolutely that, but it's also got Art Bell and portals.
Cool.
And then the remake of Prey. You said you played that, but not the Dishonoreds.
Yeah. And I probably have no more interesting opinion than what we've already read a million times, that the aliens are kind of boring / annoying / generic, but and I honestly, I don't like the like, okay, one of these objects in here is the alien. Gee, I wonder what it is.
Is it the two trash cans sitting next to each other?
Right, yeah, and it there's like a cute coyness to that probably annoys me more than most people.
Yeah.
So I didn't find any of that really super interesting, and it has the Half-Life 2 narrative where it's like, someone talks to you over a radio, or you wind up in a locked hallway and you listen to them, talk to you over the intercom for a minute, like all that sort of stuff from kind of a classic era of PC games. Like, I get it. So I don't have like a strong opinion about the game, other than, yeah, it was pretty good and it utilized a lot of these things well.
Yeah, what I'll say about Deathloop in terms of that is that it's a little bit tighter of a package because you're revisiting the same 4 areas repeatedly, and it's interesting in the way that it handles it, because there's 4 regions of the island and then there's 4 time periods, and each region in each different time period has like slightly different things going on. Like, certain areas are open at certain times. There's more enemies doing stuff because they're actually like preparing for something at some other point.
Interesting.
So it's interesting. And then there's the whole invasion mechanic, which I don't know if you read my post about it. But basically the main antagonist of the game is this woman named Juliana, who has the ability to send down clones of herself to attack you or to hunt you down as you move throughout these maps. And if you're playing it online, an actual player can invade and control Juliana and have like her own set of equipment and abilities that are similar to what you're capable of having. And so it turns into like this interesting tense PvP kind of dynamic. That's very similar to like Dark Souls invasions, but a little less, honestly, a little better executed, because it doesn't mostly turn into figuring out who can glitchily backstab the other person. I enjoyed it a fair amount, but I wouldn't strongly recommend it, because it does have some letdowns, especially narratively and mechanically with the way the whole time loop thing is handled. I'd say it's worth, if you're not interested in the multiplayer invasion stuff, I'd say it's worth at best $20. But
yeah, I'll definitely check it out. I'm definitely one of those people who doesn't mind playing games many years after release, and just avoiding discussion of it, The only problem is when you post on a forum and no one wants to talk about it anymore.
Well, nobody wanted to talk about Deathloop when it came out, honestly, on the forums. People were really, really against it, and I think it was just I'm not
similar prejudice as what I had, where I just assumed it was this like trash Borderlands roguelike or something that who would want to even bother, but it turned out to actually be a good game. Who knew?
Yeah, and I talked about that a little bit in my post, where I could kind of see where people were kind of turned off by it, but I thought it was worth checking out, just not strongly worth checking out. And like you said, like, I don't have any problem playing stuff years later, which is why Dishonored 2 is right here, right above Deathloop, because I got it for like $3.
Nice.
So, and I didn't like it that much either. It was similar. It had some neat things going on, but it was just too much of the same game as Dishonored 1.
Did you like Dishonored 1 more?
A little bit, yeah. It was at least interesting at the time to have that sort of... it was sort of like a revival of that stealth genre, but with a little bit more modernization edge, especially with the ability to... the very short-range teleport ability you get, which you can kind of do for free if you pace yourself. So that means it opens up a lot of mobility in... like the stealth genre, where like in Thief or any of the actual Thief games, you would just like get to a really awkward spot and be like, I can't really go forward and I can't really go back, and you could just go in Dishonored. You could just be like, oh, I see. There's like a ledge up there. I can like quickly zip up there and get out of this.
Yeah, I like games that have like, you know, the magical abilities or like weird movement gimmicks like that. If it actually uses it and like gives you a chance to like fit it into the game somewhere, you know, thoughtfully.
Yeah.
Like I was watching that Square Enix trailer and I can't stop thinking about it. Like Forspoken, the most stupidest, awfulest looking game ever. Where she's just like zipping and dashing and flipping and
summoning
triple jumping,
giant water balls.
Yeah, giant blizzards or water balls or all the various avatar spells, and it just looks so boring. And you gotta wonder, like, how can you put all this stuff into a game and make it look boring? Like, how is that possible?
Yeah. I mean, I'll still probably play it. But
yeah.
Someday. It's gonna be $70.
It's like the game that popped into my mind is like Momodora 4.
Yeah.
Where you unlock all these kind of movement abilities to like dash and zip and morph and transform. But they all have a purpose, and they open up like more areas of the game and like more ways to combat, the different enemies that start to pop up.
Yeah. Momodora 4 is one of those games that's probably closest to a perfect game for me. I've mentioned my concept of perfect game before, but it's mostly like that and Metroid 2.
It's a shame it's so short, but yeah, it's quite good.
Did you play Minoria?
No, I think I watched you play that one a little bit.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. There's your handler or companion or whatever. She's pretty hot, but other than that, and there's a lot of good design to it, but it's just kind of a letdown after Momodora 4. And they're going back to that art style with the new game, so who knows?
I saw that.
Hopefully that will be good.
Yeah, that's definitely one I'm anticipating. Did you already add Diablo to the list, or are you still deciding?
No. What were we saying? We were saying we're at Dragon Quest, right?
Yeah. So you're thinking probably somewhere around there, either right above or right below?
Yeah. I don't really know any good way to compare it to something like Ender Lilies, because there's so much bound up in Diablo 2. It's kind of hard to like extricate it and take a look at it from arm's length.
Yeah.
Especially now that the remaster's out. Although I'm not rating the remaster here. I'm just rating the original game.
It was a little before my time, but I enjoy reading about the kind of like months leading up to Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, and Phantasy Star all coming out within like a few months of each other.
Yeah.
And how it's like these three giants releasing these three RPGs that are like all, revolutionary and all kind of the same.
Yeah.
Have you played all three of those by chance?
I have, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Mostly Dragon Quest, more and more recently. Phantasy Star only once, and Final Fantasy 1 like twice maybe, and even that was like different versions of it.
Oh, did you play like a retranslation or like a hack that
Game Boy
balances?
Game Boy Advance. The Game Boy Advance port of it. Of Final Fantasy 1. So I don't know what translation changes there were. I know there were a lot of mechanical changes.
I don't remember which one I played of Final Fantasy 1 first, but I did try both of those. I only very, very recently played Phantasy Star,
Yeah.
and it actually blew me away how good it was.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that I don't have a whole lot of nostalgia for it because I played it pretty late, but it, I have to admit it's probably the best of the three.
Yeah, I think if you were a Sega kid during like the Master System or whatever era, it was probably a huge deal.
Yeah.
But you know, if like you and me, it was like we had a blinder there, and it was a little before my time, so I had no idea, you know.
Yeah, I only had a Genesis and a NES, so I didn't really play it.
I only recently even saw a Master System in person. Like I was in a region of America where you just never saw them. Like I would see them in catalogs. Occasionally, if we went to another town or another state and we went into a store, I'd be like, "Oh, what the hell is that thing?"
Yeah.
You know. But I honestly don't even remember even seeing one in person.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Apparently, they're still sold in Brazil to this day.
well, Brazil, they were making games for them for a long time. Same with the was it the Turbo Graphics? I don't remember. There was some other console, like weird one-off console that
Oh yeah.
the Brazilians got really hooked onto because I don't honestly know the reason why. But they had like the Woody Woodpecker game and stuff like that.
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's sort of like if there was a place in Eastern Europe where people actually still used microcomputers and made microcomputer games.
Right.
Buff Butler is complaining about what we're doing here. Get on mic, Buff. Get on the mic if you're so tough.
He might have a stronger opinion about Diablo 2's placement as well. But I think what we're talking about, like right above Dragon Quest, is fair.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at just as far as impact and like what they did with where RPGs were at a time, they're both about the same.
Yeah, and nobody's ever going to play it again because the remaster's out.
Right.
Diablo 2. Done. Alright. Now, what should I do now? Because I'm not going to have a whole lot of time tomorrow. I wonder if I should, like, try and plow through some more of these.
Have you done any VR games yet? Is that what's left?
That's a lot of what's left. I did the Room VR, Vectrix, yeah, I think those are the only two VR games I did. No, I did, I Expect You to Die as well, but not the second one. So the VR games I've still got to do are Super Hot VR, Walking Dead, Saints and Sinners, Tetris Effect, which isn't necessarily a VR game, by the way, but it is. I did play it in VR. The awful dog shit Quest 2 port of Myst.
Oh yeah, I remember you playing that.
Half-Life Alyx and Resident Evil 4 VR and I Expect You to Die 2. So nobody's going to have played any of those, I don't think, that's going to show up to this. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on any of those or.
No, not really. And I'm still not VR enabled, so can't even comment. But I do enjoy watching them be played, at least.
I haven't streamed a whole lot of them because the only way I'm comfortable streaming them is if they're going through Steam VR, because then I have this this hook that lets me put chat on my arm, basically,
Yeah.
so that I can like look at it and actually respond to people. Because otherwise, it's just sort of me like playing a game and talking to no one, and then I pull the headset off and people are having like a 3-page long argument with Sheslop about like
Dog fucking.
sewing machines.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, I guess I can just plow through the rest of the VR stuff here after I go pee. Um, but I don't think you're gonna say much about them.
No, and I gotta go to bed anyway, so I'll catch you tomorrow.
All right. Well, thanks for helping.
Yeah, thanks for the awesome stream. I'll
Alright.
catch you later, man.
All right, later. All right, so I'm gonna go pee and then come back and tear through some of the VR stuff.